Hi, welcome to this session on competency-based human resources management, organized by the Teaching Learning Center of Ramanujan College. My name is Yogesh Misra, and I'll be taking this session with you. I currently work as a vice president with Thomas Assessments for its India and SAARC business. We are the largest independent global assessment service providers, and we operate in 65 countries. I have consulted for over 300 organizations in India, Pakistan, Middle East, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, China, United States, Tanzania, European Union. I've also been a consultant to Government of India, and I have conducted strategic retreat at Labasna, Missouri, where the participants included the Minister for State and senior IS officers. I was invited as an expert by UNDP to lead the competency-based civil services reform programs. I also led the civil services reform project for Nepalese government, and this included identification of competencies and competency-based recruitment. My areas of expertise include HR, business strategy, capability building, performance management, competency, assessment development centers, employee loyalty, 360-degree, recruitment benchmarking, etc. I'm also an executive coach and a master trainer for Thomas International's various assessment tools. I've been associated with various professional bodies like the CI, Bombay Management Association, Delhi Management Association, NHRD, etc. I'm also currently the president of Delhi Management Association, which is one of the oldest management associations in the country. I've been on the International Certification Committee of ICMCI. I was also the vice chairman of IMCI in India. I got various awards, including awards for consulting. I regularly teach at various IIMs and other premier business institutes. I was also part of the advisory committee, which created the vision document for the first government skill university in India. I've got several publications in journals such as Emerald, etc. And one of my consulting work was also published in Ivy Publishing, and it's also available with Harvard Business Publishing. So that's a bit about myself. Now let's move on to the topic. What are the learning objectives of this session? Now, one of the learning objective is to give all of you an overview of what is competency and what are its applications. However, what I believe is that the great end of learning is not knowledge, but action, by Stephen Covey. So this should not be merely about you taking theoretical knowledge, but you should be able to go back and use some of the knowledge. What I will be covering would be what is talent, what is the definition of competency, theoretical definition. I'll share some examples with you. The reason for its popularity, why is it that in the last 40 years, it's now being used by almost all large organizations and governments across the world? What are its benefits? Then I'm also going to cover some of the applications of competency in human resources management, HRM function, such as competency-based recruitment, interviewing, performance management, assessment centers, PMS, 360-degree, etc. Now, all of you would be aware that there is war for talent. I've been talking with clients, and some of my clients told me that maybe even a couple of decades back, they did not have the capital. They were afraid to go out of India and invest somewhere else. However, they say now capital is abundant. We have got various people willing to fund. However, the biggest challenge which comes across is talent. And they have also said that now with so many jobs available, ideas which are cutting edge today become obsolete in 3 months. People are able to replicate things very cheaply. People are willing to change jobs very often. So from the time that people would look at you if you had changed 4 or 5 jobs in your whole lifetime, people nowadays change jobs almost every couple of years. Now, in this kind of environment, the only thing which matters is talent. We have also seen in the last 1.5 years that during these COVID pandemic times, the companies which survived were the ones which had cutting edge human resources. Because there's a saying, it's not the gun which matters, but it's the man behind the gun. Now, why do organizations use competency? They use competencies to measure one of the most important things, which is potential. Because we know what a performance of an employee is, but how do we judge what potential is? So, what is potential? Typically, we are saying potential is the upper, lower, or middle possible trajectory of what a person can do. So, will the person reach the top, reach the CXO? Will the person remain at a middle level, etc.? Is it a guaranteed trajectory? No. But we are saying it's a probability that on probability, a person who has a high potential is likely to perform better than others. Now, is potential absolute? No. It reflects the cultural and organization values. Like for somebody in academics who's a high potential, may not necessarily be a high potential in the corporates and vice versa. Another thing is that when we say somebody has a high potential, we should be able to pinpoint if a person has high potential, then it will lead to what outcome. It's possible somebody can be a high potential cricketer, somebody can be a high potential guitar player, somebody can be a high potential CXO, somebody can be a high potential R&D scientist. And all these potentials are different. That's what we mean by saying these are specific to certain jobs and domains. A potential is influenced by multiple factors, and again, potential is relative to others. It is not an absolute term. Now, what is talent? One of the definition is that talent is basically giftedness. Like when we sometimes see this person is a talented dancer, dances very well. This person is a talented golfer. This person is a talented singer. So we are saying it is giftedness. This person has got God's gift, which is clearly at the upper end of the distribution in a talent domain. So when we draw a normal curve, it is extreme right. However, one of my favorite definition, which applies to typically in corporate, is that talent is somebody who's bright enough, somebody who's got varied experience, and especially in this VUCA word, somebody who's adaptable enough to learn from it. This is talent. Now, when we look at potential, when we look at talent, another important thing that we need to look at is equity. Now, equity or equitable treatment is not about giving everyone a job or a promotion or giving everyone equal increments. However, what it means is making sure people who are equally capable have equitable access to that particular opportunity. And it also means that when we identify potential, the potential is based on valid criteria and increasingly also based on criteria which is legally defensible. That's very important because if you're saying that potential is based upon how close are you to the boss or which family you belong to or what's your surname, then obviously it is not an equitable thing and it is not based on valid criteria. Now, why competencies? Typically in the corporates, what we have seen is that a lot of times people say human resources function is a very touch and feel function. And people a lot of times accuse various HR processes such as selection, appraisal, promotion, PMS, development to be done on the basis of individual bias or subjective assessment. And it is alleged that there is very little consistency, replicability, reliability, and objectivity in these processes. We all know more critical the position, the more dangerous it becomes for these processes to remain subjective. In fact, there is a saying, one person does not make an organization. However, at a senior level, one person can definitely break it. So, what is it that competencies do? They help reduce subjectivity. Competencies can be used to integrate various HR processes on a common objective platform. So it serves as a common language. And there can be so much information that we have about various people. So it helps reduce this large amount of information into manageable chunks. So some of the definitions of competencies are that A, Voigt said, competency is an underlying characteristic of an individual which is causally related and or criterion referenced for superior performance in a given job, role, or situation. McLaren said, competency is a basic personal characteristic that are determining factors for acting successfully in a job or in a situation. And there's a book, Spencer and Spencer, in which it's written, a characteristic is not a competency unless it predicts something meaningful to the real world. So basically, what are then competencies? They are knowledge, skills, abilities described in behavioral terms that are coachable, observable, measurable, and critical to successful individual or corporate performance. They can be behavioral, they can be functional. And what is it that they help do? They help build desired culture. Once we have identified the 7 or 8 behaviors or competencies, then we can recruit people, train people on those competencies so that it will build the desired culture. Uh, we can train people on these competencies and it will enhance the capability, and it helps integrate various people related systems. Competencies also serve as a vital link between the vision, mission, values, and the results. So typically we say what a person does are the job responsibilities, the key result areas. However, what a person displays are competencies, and what a person delivers is the result. And in these, how is a person judged? A person is judged on the basis of the performance, which is the KRA, and also judged on the basis of potential. So competencies is very useful in terms of potential. I'll give you an example, and maybe let's take a couple of examples. You have 2 students who are doing work with you. And what you do is that you ask both of them to get some information from journals. Now, maybe the first person goes into the library, eh, looks at the journals, and he then says, I've been asked to get these journals, and brings the journal. The second one also takes a journal out, but then looks back and says, okay, I'm talking about the subject competencies. So makes a list of the journals, makes a list of topics, the pages on which the information is there, the citations, etc. Puts it in an Excel sheet, takes a printout, and comes back and shares it with you. So who do you think would you like? Obviously the second one, because you'd ask both of them to get information. The first one got the books or the journals. The second one actually worked on it and made it in a useful format. So the person showed some competencies such as initiative, also planning, organizing, etc. So that's what we mean by the term competency. So the job responsibility may be same, but the competencies differ. I'll give you another example. Before this COVID times, I was flying, it was in the evening, and I was reading, and it was twilight, so it was getting kind of late. And suddenly I realized that the air hostess who was passing switched on the light, looked at me, smiled, and then moved away. Now, uh, I don't think in the job responsibilities it is mentioned that if a person is reading and it is kind of getting dark, you need to you switch on the light. What it says is you are responsible for the safety and the comfort of the passenger. Now, I'm sure you would have observed many people who will just come, serve the food, uh, go away, come back, collect the dishes, and go away. While there are others who make these small, meaningful initiatives, and these activities are the ones which we'll remember. So what we are saying is competencies are what will distinguish a successful person from an average performer. So in this case, possibly we would have looked back and said customer sensitivity or customer orientation for that particular air hostess was very high. Now, there is a famous iceberg model of competencies, and a lot of times people think competencies is skills and knowledge. However, when you see this model, what you realize is that skills and knowledge is something which is visible on the surface. However, it's the self image, which is what a person views himself or herself, their personality, their values, their traits and motives, which are below the surface. And since competencies are below the waterline, they are more difficult to assess. So, why is it that competencies are so popular? There's a lot of research which has been done on it. One of the first thing is that it is one common thread which can link all and align all HR systems. So the same competencies can be used for the purpose of recruitment, for the purpose of promotion, performance management, training, etc. Uh, Once we have identified those parameters or factors, they bring objectivity in the various processes. Competencies have been found to be more important in terms of predicting superior performance. They help in reducing the gap between individuals. Once you have identified the competencies, you can train people. And we are also saying that competencies are idiosyncratic, meaning they are very specific to an organization. They depend upon the culture of the organization, and hence your human resources are very difficult to imitate. So, as per the resource-based views, they serve as a source of competitive advantage. And it's said that if behaviors exhibited more consistently by excellent performing employees are identified, then it is possible through training and coaching interventions to transmit these competencies throughout the organization and eventually raise the bar. What are the applications of competencies in human resources function? Now, competencies are useful for the purpose of selection, for the purpose of training and development. Training is for the existing job, development is for the future job. It is for the purpose of performance management. So performance management consists of what needs to be achieved and how needs to be achieved. So the what part is the KRA, and how part are the competencies. These are useful for career planning because once we have mapped the competencies needed across various roles, we can then assess a person and see uh, where do the natural competencies fit. And if somebody has been identified for a particular role, then we can map the person vis-a-vis those competencies, identify the gaps, and then train the person. It can be used for the purpose of compensation management, promotion, training need identification, for the purpose of 360-degree ratings or the multi-rater feedback, high potential identification through assessment development centers. And it's also said that it's the absence of competencies which make most of the HR processes subjective. It also helps you align various HR systems such as recruitment and selection, performance management, training and development, as well as compensation. And like we had discussed, we have business strategy, and what we want are results. Now, results are delivered through people. We can identify competencies as per the business strategies. In fact, one of my research, I had identified that competency need for organizations depend upon the business strategy. Like innovator would require different set of competencies vis-a-vis defender. So competencies based people strategies help you achieve your business results. In fact, one of the important things is that uh, it means right candidate for the right job. Now, what is the benefit? What are the outcomes of adopting competency? Why is it that people want to use competency? The first thing, like the way we said, it improves recruitment by focusing on required competencies. So you have the right person for the right job, improves individual organization and career development programs, ensures that your performance management system is specific. When you have right people for the right role, it helps reduce attrition or employee turnover, which is people leaving the organization. It helps improve communication on HR. through a common language and helps link individuals' competencies with organization strategies and goals. The next thing that most of the people look at whenever you want to do any initiative is that does it impact the firm's performance? So there's been a lot of research which says that it actually directly impacts the firm's bottom line. In fact, there is a clear-cut difference in terms of the performance, even the financial performance of companies which adopt competencies and the companies which do not adopt competencies. Now, when somebody has to implement competencies, what are some of the best practices? Are there any set of best practices? So yes, there are. So first of all, we are saying that whatever be your competencies, whatever be those 5, 10 behaviors, don't blindly copy these, because what will work for you in your organization or in your client's organization will not work in somebody else's organization. Like the way previously mentioned, competencies are idiosyncratic to your company. In order for competencies to be relevant, in order for the competencies to give benefit, we need to ensure that employees know what are the competencies, their managers know what are the competencies. Because if the employees know what are these competencies or behaviors that they should exhibit, then if they start exhibiting those behaviors, it will improve the performance of the organization. Also, it will increase the acceptance of the model. Otherwise, people will say, I don't even know what competencies are. It also says that whenever you try to implement competency, it should not be implemented immediately. Adoption of competency is like a change management process. You first unfreeze, implement the change, and then refreeze. Similarly, you should first start with recruitment, selection, training, development, then eventually move to promotion and assessment activities. The competency model, while being identified itself, you should involve the line managers, and then they should be trained on using it. And the competency should be formally documented and signed off, preferably by a senior person, such as the CEO or the MD of the company, so that everybody knows that it has a buy-in from the top. And it should be continuously evaluated for its relevance, because if the business strategy changes, if the business environment changes, the competencies will also need to be changed. Now, we have looked at what is competency. Now, there's another term called as competency framework. So competency framework is nothing but a structure where you put in all the competencies. So it consists of competencies. So you may have leadership, planning, organizing, strategic orientation, ambiguity, acceptance. So it has list of those 5, 6, 7, 8 competencies. It also has the proficiency level, meaning if I'm saying somebody needs to be evaluated on teamwork, then what would 1 on teamwork be? What would 2? What would 3, 4, 5 be? So we call these as bars, behavioral anchored rating skills. So if you have to use it for the purpose of recruitment and there are 3 candidates who come in, you can, by looking at the bars, say, here is a candidate who's on a proficiency level 1, which is maybe a novice. Here is somebody who's at a proficiency level 5, which is an expert. Here is somebody who's at a proficiency level 3, which is average or practitioner. So, and this is what we call as a rating scale. So here is an example of competency rating scale. So where we are saying 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. So you may have something such as basic, practitioner, competent, advanced, and expert. Where 1, we are saying here, it's a 5-point scale. It's a continuous incremental scale, meaning somebody who's at 4 is superior to somebody who's at 3, 2, 1. And person who's at 4 is assumed to be having competencies at a lower level. And obviously, these are only indicative behavior. This is an example of a competency framework. So typically on top, you have the title of the competency or the name of the competency. Then you will have a definition of competency, and then you will have indicators for competency. And the indicators will differ from level to level. So like suppose at a there can be a competency such as decision making. At a junior management level, we may say that the person should be able to take a decision by looking at all possible information available. But say somebody at a strategic level, we may say the person should have an ability to look beyond the information and then take decisions. And normally for competency, we also have some red flags or negative indicators, which are typically the dysfunctional behaviors for the competency. And these are the ones which are needed to be avoided. So I'll take now an example to illustrate that. So like there can be a competency which is analytical problem solving, and the definition is ability to identify problems to be addressed, collect suitable and relevant data in systematic way, generate effective countermeasures to solve the problem and remain focused. And then you may have certain indicators for junior management, and you may have certain indicators for middle management. These E1, E2, F1, F2 are the grades, and then you may have different indicators for the senior management level. And some of the negative indicators for it can be understands information but is not able to decode, may depend more on feeling rather than evaluating data for solving problems. So not data driven. Here is another example of how competencies are clustered. So normally these are list of competencies. If you see, these are 9 competencies. They have been divided into 3 clusters. Like you have a thought leadership cluster, which has strategic thinking, business acumen, analytical problem solving. You may have action leadership cluster, which will have agile mindset, ownership accountability, customer centricity, effective communication. And we may have people leadership, which will look at developing self and developing others and building partnership. Now, what we here see is that a competency such as strategic thinking for this particular organization is applicable only for the senior management, while at a level below that, what they have said is that instead of strategic acumen, what would be needed would be business acumen, while all the remaining competencies are common across. But the definition would be different, or the bars would be different.